Alexander the Great built dozens of cities, but one of them simply vanished, not destroyed by war, not swallowed by the sea. It just disappeared. For 17 centuries, no one on Earth could find it. A major port founded by the greatest conqueror in history, a city that once controlled trade across 3 continents, became a ghost in the historical record. And yet it was real, documented, powerful. This isn't just the story of a lost city. It's the story of how something that important can be erased by something as quiet as a river changing its mind. Where in the world are you watching from? I want to know who's going down this rabbit hole with me. This is Ancient Cipher. Let's begin. Let's go back to 324 BC. Alexander the Great has marched to the very edge of the known world. He turns back from the Indus Valley and returns to Mesopotamia. And there, where a mighty river finally meets the open sea, he gives one final order: build a city. You already know his most famous creation, Alexandria in Egypt, home of the lighthouse and the legendary library. But Alexander built another Alexandria far to the east, a mirror image, a twin. The archaeologist who would one day find it said it plainly. They had uncovered the eastern counterpart of that famous city, placed at the exact point where a river meets the sea, perfectly positioned to control trade flowing in both directions. Later renamed Charax Spasinou, it became the capital of a small but powerful kingdom on the edge of empires. For over 550 years, from roughly 300 BC to 300 AD, this place thrived. It connected Mesopotamia to India, Afghanistan, China, and the Mediterranean. Nearly all the sea trade entering the entire region is believed to have passed through its harbor. This was no backwater. This was a beating heart of the ancient economy. So how does a beating heart like that simply stop and then disappear so completely that scholars would spend generations arguing over where it had even stood? And that's exactly what happened. The city survived only as a name in ancient texts, a place without a location. Historians knew it had existed. They just couldn't point to it on any map. Then, in the 1960s, a British researcher named John Huntsman was studying old Royal Air Force aerial photographs of a remote stretch of land near a rise called Jebel Khayyabr. And he saw it. A vast walled enclosure, barely visible from above, etched faintly into the plain. He was convinced he had found a major lost city. He was right, but he could not prove it. And then the door slammed shut. The site sat directly on the Iran-Iraq border. As war tore through the region, the entire area became a military zone. One of Alexander's lost capitals was turned into a military camp. Tanks and soldiers parked directly on top of the ruins. For decades, no archaeologist could get anywhere near it. The mystery wasn't just unsolved, it was unreachable. Not until 2014 could anyone finally go back. When the team returned, guided by local heritage officials, they were stunned by what they saw. On that flat, empty plain, there was nothing but a low ridge, a gentle swelling in the dirt. Nothing dramatic. Until they got closer. Because that ridge wasn't just a ridge. It was a city wall, still standing. 8 meters high, running for more than a kilometer, not a foundation, not ruins. A wall, after more than 1,000 years of silence. In 2016, archaeologist Stefan Hauser joined the effort, and they quickly ran into the real problem. How do you map an entire buried city in a former war zone when you're not allowed to dig? The answer is what makes this story extraordinary. They didn't dig. They walked. Over 500 square kilometers, step by step, documenting every piece of pottery, every broken brick, every trace left behind. They flew thousands of drone photographs, and then they brought in cesium magnetometers, machines so sensitive they could read the faint magnetic ghosts of walls and streets still buried beneath the surface without moving a single grain of sand. And the city slowly bloomed back into existence. Not a fragment, not a suggestion. A complete metropolis revealed in its plan. Streets on a grid, canals, temple complexes, industrial districts full of workshops and furnaces, a harbor, a palace, all of it traced from the soil by machines and patience. The site sprawls across roughly 2.5 square miles, and then came the detail that genuinely stops you cold. The residential blocks, where ordinary people lived, were among the largest ever found in the ancient world, larger than those of many great regional capitals of the time, larger, even, than Alexandria on the Nile. Think about that. The Eastern Twin may have been built on a grander, more ambitious scale than its famous sibling, and almost no one alive had ever heard its name. If a single drone and a magnetometer can resurrect a city this size from total obscurity, what else is sleeping under the dirt right now? If discoveries like this fascinate you, do me one small favor and subscribe. This channel exists to drag the forgotten back into the light, and I want you here for the next one. Because now we arrive at the real question, the one that has haunted this story from the beginning. How does a city this enormous, this wealthy, this important, just disappear? You'd expect catastrophe, a great fire, an invading army, a plague, something violent enough to wipe a place from memory. But here's the unsettling truth. There was no villain. The river moved. The Tigris, over the slow grind of centuries, quietly wandered westward. It shifted its course, patiently, the way rivers do when no one is watching. A port city has only one reason to exist: water. As the river crept away, the harbor was cut off from the sea. The lifeline that made this place one of the richest crossroads on Earth simply dried up. Trade collapsed, people drifted away. By the 3rd century AD, the city had lost its entire purpose. Its role passed to another city downstream. Basra, and the silt, the desert, and the long indifference of time did the rest. No armies decided this city's fate. A river did. And there is something almost more chilling in that. We like to believe civilizations fall in fire and conquest, but this one was simply abandoned by the water that gave it life, then erased so completely that the world forgot it had ever stood. And the strangest gift of that quiet death is what it left behind. Because nothing was built on top of it afterward. No medieval town, no modern sprawl, no centuries of construction grinding the old plan to dust. The city was left almost perfectly intact, frozen in its final form. Which means researchers now have something almost unheard of: the chance to reconstruct an entire ancient city, street by street, building by building, from geophysics alone. A near-complete blueprint of a Hellenistic and Parthian metropolis preserved by accident. And that matters more than it sounds, because this city could shine a light on the Parthian Empire, one of the most powerful and most understudied forces of the ancient world. A rival to Rome that we still barely understand. This single site might rewrite chapters of history we didn't even know were blank. Now, I'll be honest with you, the way I always am. There's no golden tomb here, no glittering hoard of treasure pulled from the sand. Not yet. What's been found is something arguably rarer, an entire lost world mapped from the surface, waiting. The wonder isn't in the gold. It's in the scale. It's in the river. It's in the 17 centuries of absolute silence. So let's sit with what this really means. A city built by Alexander the Great, a port that fed 3 continents, a metropolis with blocks larger than legendary Alexandria itself, and it didn't fall to an enemy. It didn't burn. It wasn't conquered. It was quietly abandoned by a river that wandered off, and then swallowed by time so completely that for 1,700 years, the smartest people on Earth couldn't tell you where it was. Until a drone, a magnetometer, and a simple question pulled its streets back out of the dirt. Which leaves me with the thought I can't shake. If a city this important could hide for that long, in plain sight, just beneath a flat and empty plain, then how many others are still out there? How many lost capitals? How many vanished crossroads? How many forgotten Alexandrias are lying right now under the surface, waiting only for the right technology and the right question to bring them home? History, it turns out, isn't always buried by violence. Sometimes it's just misplaced, and sometimes all it takes to find it again is finally knowing how to look. If this rewired the way you think about what's still out there waiting to be found, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more curious minds. Subscribe so you don't miss the next decoding. And tell me down in the comments, do you think the biggest discoveries in history are behind us, or still hiding under our feet? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next mystery.